I watched from the corner of the room as they read my will, and the look on their faces? Worth every second of pain they caused me. Mouths dropped. Eyes darted. Fingers tightened around armrests. Someone let out a nervous laugh, thinking it had to be a joke. But it wasn't. Every word being read was real. Every sentence. Deliberate. And they knew it. No one looked at me. Not directly. A few glanced up, quick, guilty flashes, as if avoiding eye contact would somehow erase the choices they made. The room wasn't silent. It was swollen with tension. The kind that wraps itself around your ribs and squeezes. And as the lawyer continued reading, it became harder to pretend they hadn't seen this coming. But they hadn't. They hadn't expected me to still have control. They hadn't expected that the woman they once whispered about, the one they rolled eyes at, pitted, pushed to the side, had been watching, listening, remembering. They hadn't expected that I would take what they gave me, every insult, every lie, every moment they thought I wasn't worth a second glance, and turn it into a story they'd never forget. They thought the stroke had taken everything from me. It hadn't. It gave me clarity, a front row seat to their true selves. And while I couldn't speak the way I used to, and my hands didn't move as fast, my mind, my heart, my memory, sharper than ever. So as they sat there squirming, gasping, wondering how I'd pulled it off, I said nothing. I didn't have to, because the truth was already speaking, loudly, and it was tearing them apart. Cut to black. You want to know how we got here? Before the hospital rooms, before the whispering, before the will that broke the silence, there was a life. And it was a full one. My name was Margaret Elaine Holloway. I was a mother of 3, a wife for 41 years, and for most of my life, a nurse. Not the kind who sat behind a desk, but the kind who cleaned wounds, held trembling hands through the night, and stayed long after her shift had ended. I was the one people called in the middle of chaos, when fever spiked, when babies came too soon, when breath grew shallow and time was running out. At home I was the same. A fixer. A comforter. A quiet force holding up the beams of a house that never quite noticed the weight I carried. I loved being needed. It gave me purpose. In the mornings I'd pack lunches with handwritten notes tucked between the sandwiches. I'd iron shirts no one ever thanked me for. On birthdays I made homemade cakes. Every single year. Even when the arthritis in my hands flared so badly I couldn't sleep the night before. There were no vacations, not for me. My joy came from watching others have theirs. I took pride in making the impossible stretch. Stretching money, stretching time, stretching love. Until it fit every corner of our little world. My husband, Charles, was a good man in the way people are when they're looked after completely. He went to work. He came home. He expected dinner by 7. And over time he stopped asking how my day went. I stopped telling him. Our children, Lena, Marcus, and Alana. Each different as the sun, moon, and tide. Lena, the eldest, always wanted more. More than I could give, more than she thought I gave. Marcus, my son, sweet as a boy but hardened over time. His wife, Trina, had opinions about everything, especially me. And Alana, the baby, my soft place, at least she was once. They loved me in the way people love their constants. Unchecked. Unexamined. But I remember the night Lena called just to tell me the dress I wore to her engagement party was too much. I remember how Marcus started calling less after I asked if he was okay. I remember birthdays where I sat at the head of an empty table, waiting for visitors who never came. I remember hearing my granddaughter say, "Grandma's just boring now," and laughing behind my back. They weren't cruel. Not always. They were just busy, preoccupied, distracted. But when the kids needed tuition, I signed the checks. When Charles had his health scare, I was the one who slept beside his hospital bed, feeding him soup through a straw. When Alana lost her job, I pretended I found some extra cash in an old savings envelope and handed it to her like it was nothing. Because I had made myself into someone who could be relied upon. Someone solid. And solid things? People lean on them until they crack. But even then, I didn't see the cracks. I only saw family. And I truly believed, that love earned loyalty. That sacrifices would be remembered. That if I gave enough, I'd never be forgotten. I was wrong. But I didn't know it yet. Not then. Not when I kissed my husband on the cheek every morning. Not when I brought warm banana bread to Lena's house and watched her forget to say thank you. Not even when Marcus introduced me to someone else's mother as just the babysitter. I smiled through it, every single time, because I still believed I mattered. If you've ever given your all and felt invisible, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. And tell me in the comments, when was the moment you realized they stopped seeing you? It happened on a Wednesday. I remember because the laundry was still damp on the line, and Charles had left his thermos on the counter again. I was halfway through folding towels when my right hand slipped off the edge of the basket. I thought I had just lost balance. But then the floor tilted. My knees buckled. The basket crashed. And I couldn't find my words. Not in my head there everything was clear. But in my mouth, nothing came out the way it was supposed to. I was lucky the neighbor stopped by that afternoon. God bless her. I saw the panic in her eyes as she dialed for help, her voice cracking as she yelled my name again and again. I couldn't respond. My body wouldn't let me. It was like being locked inside myself, screaming behind glass no one could hear through. The ambulance ride was a blur of lights and cold metal. I remember the oxygen mask, the fluorescent hospital ceilings. The doctor's voice measured, too calm, as he explained I had suffered a severe ischemic stroke. In plain words, I was no longer who I had been, at least not on the outside. I could barely move my right side. My tongue felt heavy like a foreign object in my mouth. I had to relearn everything: eating, speaking, walking. They brought in flashcards for me to say words like cup, shoe, and mother. Mother. How ironic. The woman who once ran a household, juggled 3 kids, a husband, and a 12-hour nursing shift, now reduced to basic vocabulary, struggling to hold a spoon without trembling. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and sadness. Cold meals came in plastic trays. The days blurred into each other. But what hurt more than the weakness in my legs was the emptiness of the doorway. Lena came once. She looked at her phone more than she looked at me. Marcus stopped by, dropped off a basket of fruit, and left in under 10 minutes. Alana didn't come at all. No one stayed long. No one asked what I needed. And when they did, it was with the kind of smile people wear when they're already halfway out the door. The doctors recommended weeks of inpatient rehab. I heard Trina say, "Who's going to pay for that? She doesn't even talk properly anymore." They thought I couldn't hear. But I could. I always could. And the more they thought I couldn't understand, the more they revealed their truths. In hushed tones outside my door they discussed selling the house. They whispered about splitting up her things, and how I wouldn't need jewelry anymore. Someone, maybe Lena, joked, "Guess I'm the favorite now." They all laughed. And I cried. Not loud enough for the nurses to hear. Not loud enough to bring anyone running. Just enough for the pillow to catch it. One evening I heard Alana's voice. First I was relieved. She was the soft one. The one who used to braid my hair when I was sick. She didn't know I was already half awake, my eyes barely open. She stood just outside the curtain talking to Trina. "Mom's not useful anymore. You know? She's not her. I can't even look at her like that. It's like someone just pressed pause on her life and forgot to press play again." They both laughed. And my world cracked wide open. I wasn't just forgotten. I was discarded. Reduced to a burden they barely tried to carry. They didn't know I was healing. Slowly, quietly, determinately. They didn't know every smirk, every cold visit, every snide comment was etching itself into me like a tattoo that would never fade. They didn't know the woman they were dismissing was still taking notes. Because what they saw was weakness. But what I felt was fire. Low, steady, patient. Have you ever heard someone you love laugh? While you cry in silence? Have you ever realized in the quiet of your own suffering that you were completely, unforgivably alone? They say hard times reveal true character. But I've learned so does money. And power. And silence. When I was finally discharged from the hospital, I didn't return home. My home, the one I paid off with 40 years of double shifts and skipped vacations, had suddenly become too much for me, according to Lena. So they placed me in a small windowless room in Marcus and Trina's basement. A space that had once held Christmas decorations and tools was now my new life. They told themselves it was temporary. But so is kindness when it's given out of obligation. It didn't take long for their whispers to become plans. "If we sell the house now," Lena said one afternoon, not realizing I was just outside the room, "we could split it 3 ways. She's not going back there. She can't even climb stairs. Exactly, Marcus replied. It's just sitting there. She'd want us to have it. Better than letting it rot while she, fades. Fades. That's what they thought I was doing. Not recovering. Not returning. Fading. They spoke about me as if I were already gone. And the worst part? They were doing it with a casualness I wouldn't have believed if I hadn't heard it myself. Then came the day I noticed something else. The pearl bracelet. Missing. A gift from Charles on our 25th anniversary. I hadn't worn it in years, but I kept it wrapped in silk inside a carved box. I asked about it. No one knew anything. That night I couldn't sleep. And the next morning I saw it on my granddaughter's wrist. My Alina, 14 years old, laughing at her phone, bracelet flashing in the sunlight. I asked where she got it. She shrugged. It was just lying around in a box upstairs. Mom said I could take it. I said nothing. What could I say? What words do you use when the people you raise teach their children to pick over your life like vultures before your body's even cold? That wasn't the only thing that disappeared. Every month, I noticed the balance in my bank account getting smaller. I couldn't move easily, but I could still think. And I still had my old checkbooks, old statements. Things didn't match. I asked Marcus, who now had power of attorney, if he'd noticed anything strange. He patted my hand like I was a confused child. Mom, you probably just forgot some charges. With everything. With everything. That's what they hid behind now. My stroke had become their excuse. Their cover. Their license to steal. I tried again. I asked Alana, my baby, to help me get a second opinion, another accountant, someone to look into it. She kissed my forehead and said, "You need rest, Mom. Stop worrying about numbers." The money was slipping away, but worse than that was what it meant. I was no longer a person. I had become an account. An asset. A burden dressed in an old cardigan and quiet desperation. I wrote down everything I could. Dates. Missing items. Strange withdrawals. At night, when they thought I was asleep, I'd sit with a pen in my weaker hand, scribbling proof. Each line shaking but deliberate. I wasn't just trying to protect what was mine. I was trying to protect who I was. But every time I tried to speak, really speak, someone cut me off. They'd tell me I was remembering wrong. That I was confused. That the medication made me paranoid. They'd give me gentle smiles and change the subject. Wipe a pretend tear and whisper, "She's not the same." No, I wasn't the same. I was watching now. And I was remembering everything. Wait, did you see that coming? If your jaw dropped like mine did, tap the subscribe button right now. And share this with someone who still believes family always protects their own. Because what happens next will leave you speechless. When the world outside grew cruel and unfamiliar, I turned inward. Sometimes I'd sit in that dark basement room, hands trembling from fatigue, eyes heavy with tears I never let fall, and drift back to the places that made me, not the woman they saw now, but the woman I used to be, before the cane, before the slurred words, before they began planning my life like I was already gone. I remembered the winter Charles got sick. Cancer. Stage 3. Prostate. It was quiet at first, just fatigue, missed appointments. And then suddenly it wasn't. He was weak, angry, humiliated. But I stayed. I bathed him. Fed him. Sat by his side when he moaned through the night. Held his hand when he could barely lift his own. And when he cried, yes, Charles cried, I was the one who whispered, "You're still you. You're still mine." I kept working through it all. 12-hour shifts. Then 12 more at home. I lost weight. My blood pressure soared. No one noticed. Or maybe they did and didn't care to ask. I remembered when Marcus lost his scholarship. He called me that night, ashamed. "Mom, I messed up. I don't know what I'm going to do." I didn't hesitate. I walked to the bank the next morning, emptied the last of my retirement fund, and wired the payment directly to the university. I never told Charles. I told Marcus, "You get one reset button in life. Don't waste it." He never paid me back. He never even brought it up again. I remembered Alana's voice the day she showed up sobbing at my door. Her cafe had failed. She owed months of rent. "Mom, I just need time. I need something to hold me over." I co-signed a loan. Paid off her vendors. Let her move back in. I even helped her polish her resume, wrote her cover letters when she gave up halfway through. And Lena who always wanted more. When she married into wealth, I made sure she had a wedding that looked like it. I took out a loan to cover the venue, the dress, the flowers. She thanked me once over the phone while rushing out the door. They all said they'd repay me. They never did. And I never asked. Because I didn't do it to be repaid. I did it because I believe this is what love looks like. But sitting there in that cold room, with my body betraying me and my own children counting down the days to divide up my belongings, I saw those memories differently. Not as sacrifices, but as receipts. Every dollar, every hour, every ounce of love I poured into them, they'd forgotten. Or worse, they hadn't forgotten at all. They just didn't care. There was a time I was the woman who made things happen, who carried birthdays and broken hearts and mortgage payments on her shoulders like they were feathers. I gave them everything, and they gave me nothing back but distance and indifference. They couldn't even pretend to love me anymore, because loving me took effort, and their version of love had always been convenient. Some memories never fade. If you believe some wounds run deeper than time, share this video with someone who understands, and tell me in the comments, have you ever had to forgive someone who didn't deserve it? Something inside me changed the night I watched Alina walk out with my bracelet and didn't say a word. Not rage, not despair. Something quieter but heavier. A shift. A decision. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want affection. I wanted clarity. And I wanted control. I began with the one thing they thought I'd lost, my mind. They assumed the stroke had left me confused, disconnected, incapable of complex thought. They were wrong. What I'd lost in speech, I made up for in stillness. And in stillness I planned. I asked Marcus one day if I could see a speech therapist. He raised a brow and said, "That's nice, Mom, but why? You're retired." I said nothing. But I wrote her name down myself. And the following week I began. Twice a week at the community clinic, I sat across from a woman named Sasha. Patient. Young. Gentle. She never looked at me like I was broken. She looked at me like I had more to say. We practiced vowels. Tongue movement. I repeated sentences like a child learning language for the first time. My name is Margaret. I am strong. I remember everything. And I did. Between sessions, I practiced typing with one hand. Slowly at first, then faster. Emails. Notes. Password resets. I regained access to everything they thought I'd never use again. Sasha introduced me to Eleanor, a retired physical therapist who lived down the street. She came by on quiet mornings and helped me stretch my legs, press my feet flat against the hardwood, stand without trembling. She called me Fireheart, said I reminded her of someone who'd survived a war, and still made her bed each morning. It was Eleanor who wheeled me out on that spring afternoon to the old bus stop near the library. And it was there that I took my first solo trip, 1 mile and 2 decades back in time, to visit someone I hadn't seen in years. Mr. Harold Hensley, my former attorney. He still wore that same tweed jacket with the leather elbows. Still had the same sharp gaze behind square glasses. He looked surprised when he saw me. "Margaret Holloway," he said, rising slowly. "Still walking in like you own the world." I smiled. Crooked but real. "I need to change my will." He blinked, leaned forward. "That might cause some problems." I nodded once. "Good." We spent 3 hours that afternoon going through every detail. I brought a folder, handwritten notes, scribbles from the back of my calendar, password printouts, old bank statements I had found while snooping through Marcus's desk when no one was home. I had evidence. I had a plan. We rewrote the will line by line. We crafted a trust, locked funds behind clauses they'd never predict. We chose one heir they didn't see coming. We included a video to be played in my voice. What little of it I could manage stitched together word by word in my own slow, deliberate cadence. And we left nothing to chance. I went home that night feeling taller even in my wheelchair. They still fed me out of routine. Still left the TV on to keep me company. Still ignored me when I sat by the window, notebook in hand. They didn't know I was writing their ending. Not out of bitterness, but out of truth. They wanted me small, powerless, forgotten. But I was building something they couldn't touch. A reckoning. A legacy. Not out of vengeance, but out of justice. Now this is where things change. If you're still watching, you're one of us. The ones who know that quiet women carry the loudest storms. Hit like. Share this with someone who believes in comebacks. And don't forget to subscribe for stories that remind you. Some endings are earned. They thought they had time. Time to take. Time to scheme. Time to wait me out like I was a ticking clock that would stop on their schedule. But I wasn't a clock. I was a countdown. And the timer had just hit 0. The first thing I did was visit the bank. With Eleanor by my side and my notarized documents in hand, I requested a private meeting. The manager looked puzzled at first. He kept glancing at me, then at my file, unsure if I understood what I was doing. I did. More than he could possibly imagine. I want to close all joint accounts, I said slowly, enunciating every syllable. Effective today. He blinked. You, want to? Yes. All of them. Move the balances. I've already opened new accounts under a trust name. Transfer it there. He didn't ask why. Just nodded and typed. By the end of the day, every dollar that Marcus had once skimmed like pocket change was gone from his reach. Trina's plan to manage my expenses hit a wall she didn't see coming. Next I wrote checks. One to a women's shelter I once volunteered at. Another to a reading program for underprivileged kids. And then the big one. A college fund. For my great-granddaughter Eden. Lena's granddaughter, barely 5 years old, but with the same stubborn sparkle I once had as a girl. She was the only one who asked me to read to her. The only one who said, "Grandma, can I sit with you?" Without being prompted. I left her something more than money. I left her a note. Eden, by the time you read this, I won't be here. But I hope you'll grow into the kind of woman who remembers where she came from, and who made her strong. This is my hand on your back long after I'm gone. And then came the letters. Each one handwritten, folded with care, sealed in individual envelopes, labeled with names that once made my heart swell. Now they made my chest tighten. Lena, you inherited my expectations. Not my heart. You always wanted more and I gave it. But you never gave anything back without calculating what it cost you. Now you'll have to do the math without me, Marcus. You weren't always this way. There was a time you held my hand with kindness. I don't know when that boy disappeared, but the man you became didn't love me. He tolerated me. So I left you nothing to tolerate. Alana, you broke my heart in silence. Not with rage, but with retreat. You ran from the version of me that needed you most. I hope someday you face a mirror and recognize what you walked away from. Trina. You married my son but acted like you were entitled to my legacy. A legacy is earned. You never tried. You only took. So now, there is nothing left for you. And the last letter, it wasn't to family. It was to Sasha, the speech therapist. You didn't just help me speak. You helped me remember I had something worth saying. Thank you for seeing me when even my family refused to. I left her a scholarship to further her work. Because healing should be multiplied, not hoarded. Then came the video. Recorded in pieces over weeks. Each word took effort. Each line was stitched together with help from Sasha and Eleanor. It was my voice. Crooked. Paused. But unmistakably mine. The screen would go dark. Then my face would appear. Weathered. Tired. But proud. You thought I was too broken to speak. But I've been listening. I've listened to your whispers behind doors you left half open. I've heard you divide a life I worked to build. I heard your jokes. Your pity. Your silence. And I wrote down every word. This will you're about to hear. It isn't revenge. It's a record. A final act of clarity. Not for justice. But for truth. You showed me who you were when you thought I was too weak to understand. Now you'll learn who I am. Even without strength in my hands. I still had strength in my will. When it was done I sat by the window. The one in Eleanor's sunroom. The light touched my face, soft and golden, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not because they'd suffer. Not because they'd be shocked. But because finally, they'd know the woman they cast aside, never truly left quietly. The room was filled with the scent of entitlement. Leather chairs. Polished shoes. Tense smiles stretched across faces too proud to show nerves. The lawyer's office, usually a quiet place of business, buzzed softly with anticipation. But it wasn't the kind of anticipation born of grief. No one wore black. No one held hands. No one cried. They were here for one thing. The reading of my will. Marcus sat stiffly in a navy blazer he hadn't worn since his last promotion. Trina beside him, legs crossed, fingers already tapping away on her phone. Lena arrived 10 minutes late and loud, complaining about traffic. And Alana didn't speak. She wore sunglasses indoors like shame could be shaded. Eden sat in the corner, swinging her little legs beneath the chair, whispering to a book in her lap. She didn't understand the weight of what was about to happen, but she would. Mr. Harold Hensley entered, holding a slim black folder. He greeted no one, just cleared his throat and began. Per the request of the late Margaret Holloway, we will begin today's proceedings with a personal message. He turned toward the mounted television. The screen flickered, and there I was. Not from years ago. Not edited or airbrushed. But me. As I had been. Scar on my cheek. Hair thin. Words slow. But gaze steady. Voice deliberate. If you're watching this, it means I've finally gone quiet. But not without having the last word. The room stilled. Even Trina's phone was silent. This is not revenge. This is remembrance. Of who I was. And who you weren't. I gave my life to this family, not in theory, but in time, money, blood, and care. I poured into you while pouring out of myself. And I expected nothing but love in return. But love, true love, doesn't hide when illness comes. It doesn't count coins while someone learns to speak again. It doesn't laugh behind closed doors while the one who raised you fades in a basement. Eyes shifted in the room. Fidgeting began. You thought I was unaware. But I heard it all. I remembered everything. And I wrote it down. To Marcus. You took my power of attorney and used it like a bank card. You saw my silence as a blank check. You'll find your name removed from every account and asset. I leave you only one thing, a record. Of every withdrawal you made. The lawyer has copies. You'll explain them. In court. Marcus stiffened. Trina gasped, finally silent. To Lena, you loved performance. Appearances. Grand parties, bigger lies. You wore pride like perfume, heavy and cheap. I leave you nothing but the receipts for the wedding I paid for. And the note you never sent. To Alana, you hurt me most because I believed in you the longest. You had my softness. My laugh. My love for words. But you grew cold when I needed warmth. I leave you one letter unopened. Inside is a poem you wrote me when you were 10. I hope it reminds you of the girl who loved without calculation. The silence in the room turned to ice. Just quiet devastation. Then the video shifted slightly. But not everyone failed me. The camera cut to a photo, Eden resting her head on my shoulder. Then to Sasha helping me hold a pen. And finally to Eleanor, braiding my thinning hair as we sat in her sunroom. To Eden, you are my hope. You saw me not for what I lost, but for what I still held. I leave you the house, paid in full, along with a trust fund for your education. May you fill it with books and dreams. Eden's eyes widened, but she said nothing. She kept reading her book. To Sasha, you taught me how to speak again. You helped me reclaim my name. I leave you a fund to start your own clinic. Keep helping voices that feel forgotten. To Eleanor, you gave me sunshine when my family gave me shadows. You showed me that friendship can still bloom after 60. I leave you the garden. You always said it was more yours than mine. When the video ended, the room remained frozen. Harold cleared his throat again. That concludes the reading. No applause. No anger. No closure. Only truth, laid bare in front of those who had hoped for wealth, but instead inherited wounds of their own making. Trina rose first, dragging Marcus by the arm. Lena stayed seated, blinking blankly at the now black screen. Alana cried, not loudly, but the kind that shakes the chest, where guilt finally finds a voice. And Eden? She walked to the front of the room, placed her book on the table, and whispered. Grandma wasn't quiet. She was watching. They all came expecting treasure. What they received was a mirror. And some reflections are harder to live with than any empty bank account. I didn't die angry. I died free. Not because justice was loud or revenge was sweet, but because I reclaimed what they tried to take. My voice. My story. My worth. The last days weren't filled with machines or sterile walls. They were soft. Still. Mine. Eleanor's sunroom became my sanctuary. There, I watched the hydrangeas bloom and wither in slow, poetic cycles. Birdsong replaced beeping monitors. The scent of jasmine replaced bleach. No more pretending. No more waiting for visitors who never came. Just warmth. Just truth. And in that truth something beautiful happened. Letters started arriving. One from Sasha, who'd opened her first speech therapy clinic in our small town. She named it Margaret's Voice. Inside the envelope, "You didn't just learn how to speak again. You reminded me why I chose this work. Thank you for showing me what real strength sounds like." Another from Eden's mother, Lena's daughter, quiet, private, barely ever spoke in family gatherings. She wrote, "I didn't know the things they said. I was too young, too scared. But I watched. And I remember the way you smiled even when no one deserved it. Eden will grow up knowing who you really were." Even one from a nurse at the hospital years later. "You don't remember me. But I remember you. You said, 'Some things break but we still serve.' I was going to quit that week. I didn't. You saved more lives than you know. And still I wasn't chasing legacy. I was simply resting in it. Because legacy isn't money. It isn't the house. Or the furniture they fought over. It's what echoes when the door finally shuts behind you." Eden came to visit often in those final weeks. She'd bring books. Sit cross-legged at my feet, read stories aloud, even when my eyes could no longer stay open. One afternoon she asked, "Grandma, did you ever write your own story?" I smiled, or tried to, and nodded. "It's in the box. The red one." She found it, my memoir, handwritten with uneven fingers, edited slowly over years, stitched together in moments of clarity. The last pages were dated just days before my final breath. They tried to erase me, ignored me, pitied me, counted me out before my time was done. But I wrote myself into every silence. I carved myself into every forgotten corner. I lit a match in the dark and made myself unforgettable. If this story moved you, if it made you cry, made you angry, or reminded you of someone you loved, leave a comment and tell me. These aren't just stories. They're truths hidden in plain sight. Don't just subscribe, join our family. Because these are the stories that need to be told.